Linda Hull and Keir Graff, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer podcast.
Thanks for having us. As
Thank
usual,
you.
love getting to talk to you.
Mm. Yeah, Linda Hull in Denver, catching Keir Graff at his home in Chicago. And we are just a week away, I believe, from the launch of your fourth collaborative book, The Royal Game, coming out on January 30th, correct?
Yes, can you believe it?
It's hard to believe, yeah.
I certainly can't. And I'm really looking forward to like an in-person book launch, something we haven't had for a while.
Yeah, we
Are
did the
you
last one via Zoom, and it was of questionable value and decent attendance, but difficult um, audio. We had some kind of delay or problem, if I recall.
We had a lovely conversation, but Zoom book launches do not sell books.
Uh,
are you each doing something in person in Chicago and Denver and flying back and forth?
We have a book launch on February 8th at the Irish Rover in the Limerick Room because it fits our theme, and 6 p.m. and it should be big fun. And then we go on to Chicago where Keir has organized, with the help of our publicists, a bunch of events in the Chicagoland area. Isn't that what they call it?
Yeah, Chicagoland was one of those kind of weird realtor designations that somehow slipped into common usage, unfortunately. Yeah, we've got on Tuesday, the 13th of February at 7 p.m. We'll be at the Bookseller in Lincoln Square, a wonderful little bookstore. And then we've got a couple other things scattered around, but that's the main event.
That's
Well, we
great.
do have also in Wisconsin.
Ah, and any other stops? Linda, I know you've got some St. Louis roots. Are you going there too?
Working on that, and
Yeah,
we're going to be at the Tucson Festival of Books, and we don't know from there. There's some more
yeah,
stuff in the offing, but we haven't announced it quite yet.
yeah.
And frankly, we're
Well,
too busy writing the next book to really do too many events.
That's true.
wow. Okay. Well, I think we want to hold off on that for just a second, but I do want to find out more about that one. But I think this is really an interesting conversation because you had sort of a brand, I would say, going with your first three books in terms of you could find some underlying themes in terms of um, they're basically some sort of mystery crime element running through it. A lot of domestic issues I mean, it might be a stretch to say they all had a um, underlying current or common denominator to them. But at least they were in that sort of dark, little bit of mystery going on. What contemporary fiction maybe with a heavy dose of crime fiction. Would you accept that?
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah, okay.
good.
But along comes the Royal Game, and hey, by the way, you can see my little notes here. But this is a real departure because, and I had to look up how to pronounce the actual type of genre this is, a Romana Clay. You don't pronounce the F. Ramona Clay, because it's very clear this is all modeled after well-known royal celebrities and people who have been in those royal positions. So I'd love to know from your all perspective just how this project came about and what was the discussion like between you two in terms of saying, okay, we are going to dive in and go for this.
Well,
Linda?
unlike all of our other projects, but first of all, we kind of felt like it fits into our overall relationships in some form of crisis fiction that we've done our previous books based upon. But we were approached by Alloy Entertainment, which is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, and they actually have written a whole lot of books that have made their way to the New York Times bestseller list and also into production through the WB. And they are a literary think tank. They come up with ideas and they find writers who are willing to write the general idea. If it weren't COVID when we wrote the book, we would have gone to New York and sat with them with a giant whiteboard. And Keir and I were both intrigued by this idea of getting to see how the sausage was made a little differently than we created books together in the past. So we signed on for the project, and the Royal Game is what came out of it.
I think one of the things that was really intriguing about this prospect is that, I mean, we're already collaborators, and we've had a few books in which to kind of fine tune our collaboration. The first one was terrifying and daunting, and we spent several years writing and getting that book out into the world. And then, by book three, I think it was a pretty well-oiled machine. And then here's an opportunity to kind of supercharge that collaboration by working with some really talented story executives from Alloy. And also our wonderful agent, Josh Getzler, was in the room for many of the story sessions. So I kind of always wanted to be in a TV writer's room, and this is the closest I've ever come. I mean, we're both obviously collaborative people, and this was just so much fun, kicking ideas around. And the way it worked is we plotted the book together in a group, kind of everybody letting the best idea win. And it was really rewarding because people weren't overly protective about the stuff they brought in. It just felt like there was general enthusiasm for making the story the best it could be. But then once the story was outlined and the outline was locked, then Linda and I went away and just wrote as we normally do.
So we'll get to the story and the description of the plot here in a second and the general setup. But if I could interpret what you just said, it sounds to me like you guys basically developed a collaborative teamwork atmosphere, and it was sort of fun to see that expand and bring in other voices to your process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah. And not, there wasn't any taking away, which was nice. It wasn't like we were told what to write exactly. We were given an idea and then we all developed it together. So it felt very much like our own book, but one in which the kernel idea it didn't originate with us, but it certainly became our writing and our work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to be fair, this is an idea we would have never come up with on our own. But I think once you have the assignment, I love an assignment, I love a deadline, and I love a challenge. And the blank page contains infinite possibilities, and as we all know, sometimes that can be the thing that slows us down most. When you have a set of parameters and you can kind of, once you feel the story and you feel the characters come alive, any story can be very exciting to write. And again, just being collaborators, I think we're not, I think writers by nature can be very solitary and very protective of their ideas, but we've been doing this long enough that that's just not us at all. We're not ones to jealously guard our own whatever creativity or something. And so there's just a real joy, I think, in hearing ideas from other people and weighing them and testing them and seeing how it all shakes out.
This is such a key idea, actually, and something I've actually been thinking a lot about lately. Just looking back on my own ability to let go, in first, 10, 15 years ago, it might have taken me several months to let go of something I'd written and to really feel like I had the space to criticize it. I think now I could write a paragraph that I thought was awesome, and 2 seconds later, I could be completely detached from it and willing to analyze it. I mean, it's such an important skill to be able to pour your heart and your passion into a scene, a piece of dialogue. And it's such a great skill to have to get to that point where you can just instantly say, okay, now I'm in editing mode. What sucks about this and what do I want to keep?
Did
I
it
mean,
this
sometimes
talk
it's
about-
more instant than others. I mean, just this morning, I moved a few paragraphs from one chapter into another chapter that I was kind of battling with Linda a couple days ago. But sometimes it just takes a little time to let it sink in. And as long as you're willing to talk about it, and as long as you're willing to consider that you might be wrong, yeah, it can work out.
And as a result of what Keir did this morning, I have to do the same thing. I had written a scene a little bit around, I wanted a couple to have a gun going up into the woods for this new project we're working on to protect themselves against the character I'm writing, who's not dangerous. And really loved that idea that, she's realizing that people are scared of her and that this is the impact it's having upon people around her, the perceived danger. And I have to get rid of that today.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with it. It does not work anymore, but it takes you a minute. And sometimes you write a whole scene around some idea that you think is really, really important, in propelling the story. And then it's gone a minute later because of everything that we've developed and where Keir's character is going in our new book. I have to take it out.
And that happens a lot more with collaboration than writing solo, but honestly, I think that strengthens the writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got our first couple of clues about the new project. We'll get there eventually, but we've got gun, woman, and woods. So, got a start of, kind of getting some images in our head.
You just gave away the title, Gun, Woman, Woods.
It's actually not too bad.
Gun, woman, wood. Maybe we'll put
Yeah.
that in the file.
Yeah. Okay. One more kind of thought on this. And you kind of skipped over it a little bit. And we've talked about this on the podcast before a little bit, but you kind of said, oh yeah, we worked together on that first book for a little while. That was brutal. And you guys went through the ringer getting that the swing of things, first collaboration, not only to a point where your agent could sell it, but there was just all sorts of variations of how that project morphed and changed and kept getting attacked and rewritten. How important was that process looking back? Now you're 4 books in and you're clearly working on 5. How important was all that terror and heartache to what became your team, your partnership?
Actually, I would argue that despite the difficulties of rewriting to get it published, it was a brilliant experience. It was fun. It was amazing to find out you could work with a co-author. We didn't know each other very well, so and the subject matter was kind of, spicy. So we were kind of careful that way, where there's all kinds of different elements that happened, and it broke all the ice in terms of collaborating with someone. So I look at it as a really fond and great period of time. It just took longer to sell that book than we had hoped it would. But everything else about it to me was pretty great.
Yeah, the writing and creating part was, it was a little scary at first, a little challenging at first. Then it became really kind of electric to write with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And the process of getting to a first really good draft was not almost nothing but positive. It was really the trying to sell it process where we were tasked with some rewrites and changes, and it just went on and on and on. But I think that yeah, that kind of experience, it gives you sort of a foxhole mentality, and obviously, hardship can kind of bond you together. And so that probably was important for our partnership to go through all that and then actually sell a book that was pretty well received. Yeah.
Yeah, people don't write together that often. So, they do, but it's made it enormously easier for us to move quickly together now. We just have things that we probably like, love, and don't like about each other very much, and we just accept them all as part of this process of moving forward, and we're able to do it fast once we're working together on something. So in the newest thing we're working on, I spent almost, much of last year writing out scenes, and I have it roughed out to the end. And now that Keir's involved, it's changing everything for the better. But it's how it goes.
Yep. Well, very interesting. Very interesting. All right, so let's get into the royal game. It's, I loved it. Okay, there's that. But who wants to set it
Thank
up?
you.
I would say I'm not the target audience.
That's what I'm saying. You don't have to love it.
Yeah, but it was just
okay not to.
freaking page turner, and there's that sort of the whole idea that I might be reading something that you can see the connections to real world, if royal life is a real world. You can see the whole setup and the family versus the new incoming person who is maybe not meeting all the standards we need to meet, and needs a lot of lessons in what this new culture is. So there's just so much intrigue right from the get-go. But Well, why don't one of you, maybe Keir, start and just give us the whole setup?
Okay, so the Royal Game is about Jenny Jensen, who is a 27-year-old American pop singer from Peoria, Illinois. And she is on a solo acoustic tour of the Mediterranean, kind of trying to revive a flagging career, when she has a meet cute with a man that she does not recognize as the heir to the British throne. In fact, she kind of admonishes him from the stage. Uh, but whirlwind romance ensues. He proposes to her. She accepts. Her life changes overnight. And as she's kind of entering into this dysfunctional British ruling family, a couple things happen. One is that she discovers that her deceased mother-in-law, whom everybody believes died in a tragic accident, may in fact have been murdered. And two, Jenny starts getting threatening notes herself, and decides she has to kind of figure out what happened to her mother-in-law if she doesn't want to be next.
That is
And
Anything
that
else to
makes
add
it
to
sound
that?
more, and that makes it sound more thrillery probably than it really is, because it is. I mean, the new territory for us is that this is a romance with a mystery, or a mystery with a romance. I mean, it's kind of half and half, but we had never, we've written about a lot of messed up relationships before, and this does have some of that, but the actual, romance between Jenny and Hugh it's real. It's a romance, and we were really trying to kind of do something different, but there's a strong mystery at the heart of it too.
Well,
And
and
it's bring the, yeah, sorry.
the additional factor is just that the whole world is watching.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which,
Yeah.
I thought about a lot in writing it, how it would be to be that person that the whole world is watching you at all times, no matter what. You have no privacy and no secrets and no anything really.
And threading through the whole thing is kind of a story unfolding in a different timeline, which is told through the journal and experiences and some various kind of documents pertaining to Princess Penelope, who is Prince Hugh's dead mother, Jenny Jensen's deceased mother-in-law, and kind of teasing the reader with what might have happened there, but also really providing kind of a primer on royal life and what Jenny can expect as she enters this family.
Yeah.
And
Must have been fun to figure. Go ahead, Linda. Sorry.
I was gonna say she's totally naive and unsuited for it. In that
Yeah.
way that we as young girls who fantasize about being princesses, what it's really like, not that I did, because I'm not really that kind of girl, but
That was me.
but Keir did a lot of that fantasizing about being a princess, but really there's almost no one that's suitable for that role, and that sort of comes out in this.
Yeah, there's certain jobs like President of the United States that really nobody can do, but somebody tries to do them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It must have been fun to figure out, this issue of who she can trust in this brand new world. I mean, she's completely cocooned and just sort of surrounded by an immense, huge new universe, and she has to figure out and navigate, just feel her way in terms of who can she trust. And it must have been kind of fun. You have so many different options and so many different people. It's a really well-populated novel.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, it's fascinating because, of course, there's, somebody entering into a new world is always fertile ground for fiction. Certainly, the royal family, like any weird closed society, any dysfunctional family, has lots of different possibilities in it for characters. It's a perfect setting for a mystery because there are so many people around that you can kind of pick and choose who's going to be trustworthy, who's not. Hopefully, we've done a good job of keeping from readers the secret of what actually happened and who done it till the end. But yeah, we had a blast with those ancillary characters, didn't we, Linda?
More fun even than writing the main characters, because you got to put a lot of the uh, crazy stuff, the crazy shit, they get to do them and act like it and be sort of how you imagine ancillary characters in the royal family might be.
Yeah. Did you split up the writing each, the Hugh and Jenny?
Keir wrote Jenny and I wrote Princess Penelope, for a variety of reasons. And turns out Keir's really good at writing 27-year-old women. Seems to be one of his specialties. He did that in our last book quite well. Yeah, for a couple of reasons. I had wanted the role of Penelope to be quite a lot bigger, in terms of pages, but that was something that I wasn't as happy about with the Alloy experience, working with them, because they wanted her just to be little, her influence to be throughout the book, but her actual pages to be smaller. I would have done more with that, given my own druthers. But Keir drafts a lot faster than I do, so we decided he got Jenny and I got Penelope, and that's the way this went. It was fun though. I did a lot of research on Princess Penelope's who she was fashioned after, shall we say.
Yeah, there was definitely a ton more research involved per page for Penelope, and Linda really carried that burden. And it is one of those interesting things. We went into it thinking it was going to be a 50-50 story between past and present and these two characters. But with the wisdom of the group kind of taking precedence, it was decided that the present day storyline would probably be more ultimately engaging, or just give readers a little more of a focal point. But I think that in the end, the balance hopefully will feel natural to everybody. And I certainly appreciate your comment about pacing, Mark, because I think that the pacing ended up being great. I was really pleased with that.
I agree.
Yeah. I've got a quick question about that, but I'm going to just quickly read from Publishers Weekly, the very end of this knockout review. It says Keir, that's the surname they pick for the both of you, Linda Keir. Linda Keir ends the tale with a bang, revealing the truth about both the plane crash that killed Penelope and the threats to Jenny. With empathy and emotion, plus a large supporting cast with questionable motives, Keir reveals the cracks in the princess fantasy, even when one has the perfect prince. Royal romance fans will be hooked. Very nice, very nice. As you guys wrote this, I'm wondering if your personal views on the royal family changed, and if your empathies / sympathies, fascination with either Kate Middleton or Meghan Markle, did that shift? Did you, in the process of writing fiction, develop more empathy or even just plain old interest in somebody like Meghan Markle being pulled into this closed society, as you say, Keir? Maybe start with Linda.
So I did an enormous amount of reading about Princess Diana, and I am a little bit of a gossip slut anyway, if you will, because I feel like good stories come out of interesting gossip and conjecture, and so I've paid attention to a ton of it. And while we were writing the book, I paid a lot of attention, and I sort of cared. I've lost that interest since I went back to my normal amount of interest in the royal family, which is whatever. I do feel like I have both more antipathy and more empathy for all characters involved as a result of what I learned about what it would really be like to live in that world, but also the public's undying interest and opinions, which have nothing to do with reality, or if they do have to do with reality, they're so filtered through everyone's own personal experience that I think it'd be very hard to have your voice heard in a realistic way about who you are and what you represent. And it would be a lifelong challenge once you come into that environment.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating because it feels like one of those things. Like, we live in a world where everybody feels like they have to choose sides on everything, regardless of how well informed or uninformed they are. And the royal family is certainly an institution like that. I have never been, a fan of the monarchy. I think that monarchies are kind of, dying institutions that we're probably better off without. But as a writer, I'm always interested in any dysfunctional subculture. Certainly, the House of Windsor qualifies. And it's one of those stories that I always kind of followed at arm's length, not like hanging on every last bit of gossip, but I'm just always curious. I mean, certainly when I was younger, I was a literary Anglophile, and so a certain knowledge of the history of England and the monarchy kind of comes with that. Um, as far as back to your original question, I I think that probably I became more sympathetic because it's fascinating. There's so much. At first, like Meghan Markle was getting a lot of support from at least certain quarters, saying that she had experienced, racism at the hands of the royals and a lot of the British public. And it's fascinating how that seems to have undergone an almost 180-degree turn, and that now she's just getting rolled on social media, and people are accusing her of being false and this and that. And I just thought, I don't know her. It's impossible to know really what lies in her heart, but I think it's an impossible role she was thrust into. I think that her attraction to Harry seemed genuine. They seemed to be, genuinely in love with each other. And this is just it's an institution, and it's a spotlight that no normal relationship can survive. I mean, I I'll be amazed if they're together and happy 10 or 20 years from now, and I hope they are. But it's just the pressures are unforgiving. And so I think as a writer, as writers, our job is always to find the human being at the heart of any character, of any story. And when you just boil it down, I mean, yes, we created our own alternate versions of these characters. I mean, our Jenny Jensen is not Meghan Markle, but she's in a similar position. And you spend a lot of hours with those characters, and I think it can't help but make you sympathize with the pressures that real life counterpart is going through.
Yeah.
Yeah, this week with Kate being hospitalized and what is it? I found myself very fascinated, like, what's wrong with her? I hope she's okay, in a way like
Yeah.
I knew her, which I wouldn't have, I don't feel with other celebrities. I don't get all like, oh, this person's sick or this person's died. And I do feel that. And now after a week's gone by and we don't have any real information about anything beyond abdominal surgery, the conjecture on TikTok is all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of painful for me to think about what people are saying. And here's this woman's thrust into the spotlight for years and years, and doing, whether she's nice or not nice, or she's a mean girl, or she's a this, and all the things I'm hearing are sort of irrelevant. Something's gone very, very wrong, and she's having to live it, whether it's physical or it's psychological or it's some combination, because that's what now that's being thrown about. The poor woman is having to recover in private, in public, and that's really challenging.
Yeah. Yep.
Even if you think you wanted it.
Yep. Linda, you said you did a lot of reading and research, and I'm sure Keir did a lot as well. But I have to ask, did you watch The Crown, the last season of The Crown? And I mean, I guess you were probably done with the draft of it long before this last season came out, but it's such a widely, known and watched version of the royal family. Did you find yourself trying to just ignore how they treated that, or did you look to it for insights? Any thoughts there?
I watched the last season. I didn't watch this season. I can't watch the stuff that I've paid so much attention to, because I would have probably done things a little different. But that's just me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was very eager to watch the new season. I mean, I've got a few episodes to go, but I really was eager to watch that first set of new episodes they released that have the Diana storyline, because I just thought I would, I definitely consumed The Crown among many, many other resources, while writing. But yeah, our book was done before the Diana portion of The
Yeah.
Crown really came out. The key moments of that anyway. And so at that point I was ready to really see how they handled it. I mean, it's fascinating how I think a lot of people are watching The Crown as if it's a documentary. And it's
Yeah.
it's just almost as fictionalized as what we've done. But it's very interesting. I think the current season really feels to me like it's intended to rehabilitate Charles, because he definitely comes across as far more interesting, eloquent, and sympathetic than he does in the real life stuff we studied. He's maybe he's gotten the short end of the stick in some ways, but yeah, and part of the problem is too, they cast Dominic West, who's just, far more charismatic than Charles would ever be.
Yeah.
So Charles has that going for him. But yeah, I found it very fascinating. As I said, I just got a couple episodes to go. It's a really well done series in general, just
Yeah.
pure drama. And I think the first couple seasons are just probably the strongest.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Wonderfully informative. Even if a bit fictionalized, about stuff that I was reading about and learning about the past before we got to where our story opens.
Yep. Yep. Very good. So, wondering, going back to the whole way this project came to be, take us back to that day when you first had those conversations with Alloy, and how close in the end, how much does this match that original vision for this book and this novel?
I think very closely, right, Linda?
Very closely, very closely. This is the head people over at Alloy. It was a woman and a man, Joel and Josh are their names, and they had an idea, and what we came up with at the end was very close to, I believe, what they originally thought of as a story. They thought there was a royal story still to be told. There was an appetite for, stories about royalty, and they wanted to create their own version of the Harry and Meghan romance and the dangers of living in the palace. And we may have upped the mystery a little bit. I think we
I think the mystery was increased partly just through our group conversations, but so I think that was probably more than they were originally intending, but I think it was something we all agreed on.
Mm-hmm. I was very much pressing for Jenny's mom to have a huge role, because I love the idea of the American mom from Peoria getting into the palace and being like, "Oh my God, my daughter's marrying a prince." I mean, I loved that, and everyone, like Keir's expression was just like, "Okay, Linda, okay, Linda." There was a little of nodding their heads and pretending to pay attention to my need on this, but she ended up having a cool little place that I enjoyed. I just love the idea of Karen from Peoria, sitting in the palace with her daughter and being like, "Oh, look over at that lampshade. Look at this. Look at that."
Yeah.
Karen's a very fun character, but I think in the end, ultimately, it was more that as we were trying to navigate that line of romance, we thought, well, how much do we want mom to be there?
The romance. Yeah. Mom kind of ruins the romance a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will
And then
say
Hugh kissed Jenny tenderly, looked up and saw Karen gazing at them from across the room.
lovingly. Yeah, and I will say, and this is a little bit of a detracting from this exact conversation we're having, but at one point during the writing of the book, I had a chance to go to England, and I did, and I got a tour of Buckingham Palace, and there had been a scene that I had written at the beginning of the book of Princess Penelope getting married, going up the grand staircase and walking through the palace to have photos taken, and I had a moment, and I did the whole thing. It was during COVID. I did the whole thing online, looking at schematics and looking at videos and finding out as much information as I could about what it looked like and what it felt like to be in there. And then there I was on the tour, and I found myself at one moment standing exactly in the staircase, exactly where I pictured my character, looking up, and it was really cool and surreal. And it was pretty accurate. I mean, you can a lot online that you need. And then I had come up with a scene later on in the book, which had it was a fundraiser. It was a disco fundraiser in a certain room, which is really far-fetched, probably wouldn't happen, right? But wanted it there, and that they hung a disco ball from a chandelier in this one room. And I was like, there's no way that room's gonna be on the tour, because it seemed like it was an interior room that was far away. And that room was on the tour, and it was part of they had a Queen Elizabeth's jewelry collection in that, and I got to stand in that room and be like, "Oh my God, this room's going to work." Exactly. It was an almost unadorned room
Wow.
for the palace. And it was painted white and stuff. And so it actually worked for our scene quite well. And it was sort of thrilling.
What a great moment. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
One thing that is very cool for research is there are kind of like video fly-throughs of so many of these famous things, and then obviously like Google Street View is like my best friend, and you can see so much. It's such a godsend to a working writer today, because of course, I'm so glad Linda got to take that trip. I did not go, but given a perfect world, we'd all have 2 years to write and research every book, and we'd have travel budgets to go check this stuff out, and that would be the most fun thing in the world. But so often, as you know, Mark, like we're also checking stuff out from our desk. But the royal family and their royal properties, with some exceptions, are so well documented. Even some, we set some things in some things that weren't palaces necessarily, but that were other important locations, and you can get a good look at them.
Yeah, that's great. A quick nerdy question about just how this process works with Alloy, and then we're going to get to the new project, and then we're going to wrap up. But so Alloy comes in, and without getting into numbers, they, I assume, take a cut. And also, are they checking your prose as it's coming off the keyboards? Are they weighing in on the story, and then they finally sign off, and then your agent Josh goes out and finds a publisher, which in this case is Blackstone? Can you just walk us through that? Some people might be like, how does this work?
That's a really good point. I don't know how many specifics we can go into.
No,
but
you just structure.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it's interesting because it's not like a work for hire where they cut you a check and you go off and write the book. It's very collaborative. They give you a little bit of a retainer to sort of formalize the working arrangement, and then we go off and write. And as I said before, we outlined together, but nobody was really looking over our shoulder while we were writing. I think we sent the first 100 pages, right, Linda? Yeah, we sent like 100 pages and kind of got their approval just to make sure they liked the tone and the style. And I think there was a few suggestions, but it wasn't a heavy edit. And then I think we kind of went off and wrote the rest of the book. It was not micromanagement at all. And then, the way it works is our wonderful agent, Josh Getzler, goes out and, sells the book. And then effectively we share the proceeds with Alloy, up and down the line. And it's a really unique arrangement because they're kind of book packagers, but they're not necessarily the traditional packagers.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think other people might have had more editing oversight than we do. Keir is a really accomplished editor, and so we write fairly clean copy, very clean copy. Actually, our editors generally don't do much to our books when they get turned in because of what he's done. So, they realized after 100 pages that we had this in terms of what they wanted and that we were accomplishing it, and in a pretty decent time frame. So no one was worrying.
Yeah, in fact, that first 100, once it was revised enough that they were so excited about it that they wanted to go out and sell the project based on a partial, which is not something that happens very often.
Yeah. So would you do another approach like this with a company like Alloy?
I don't know that there are too many companies like Alloy, but a wonderful working relationship with them. I mean, they're just great. I thought it was really fun throughout.
They have a cachet too that helps get the book sold. In a way that if we had just been on our own, might have been a little different.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're really hoping, of course, that their development deal with Warner Brothers will result in some sort of a screen product. Hard to say if that'll happen or not, and or whether they might take it out and do it somewhere else, or whether nothing will happen at all. But that's always, not so much because I'm dying to see what somebody does with our book, but obviously that sells books.
Yep, for sure. That's great. Wow. Very cool. Well, let's just give us a sense of Woman Gun Woods. And what's the next project?
I'll let Linda tell you, but I just want to say we actually do have what I think is one of the greatest titles for any of our books, but we're keeping that under wraps just because, some I'm not superstitious about putting stuff out there, but this one we don't want to give it away.
That's great.
The the pitch that I can give so far is a social media influencer whose brand, if you will, is Happy Marriage, is accused of killing her husband, wrongfully accused of killing her husband, and sentenced to life in prison. And on her way to the big house, there's an accident, and she finds herself free, and she realizes she's the only person that can get to the bottom of what happened and get herself exonerated for the crime she didn't commit. In the meantime, everyone's after her, including the authorities from the area where she's escaped. And Keir's character is being written. Keir's character is the sheriff of the small town who's looking for her, along with a whole lot of other people, and the effect of social media and everybody's opinion on what happened and her guilt and where she is, and looking for her, and getting in the way of both her being apprehended, the crime being solved, and her getting herself to safety.
This is my big opportunity to prove I can write somebody who's not a 27-year-old woman.
Yes, and it seems like you can. You're doing a good job of writing a guy
Thank you,
in
Linda.
his 40s.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using my imagination, but I'm figuring it out.
Yeah, I'm just impressed. He's like real manly and everything.
Wow. Is this something that Blackstone is waiting on? Do they have rights to it? Or is it something that just Josh will figure out where to sell it when it's done?
This is because it's not developed with Alloy. We believe this is not our option book. So the intent is that this will, certainly we'd love to have Blackstone look at it. We're really excited to be publishing with them, but as this is an unsold title so far.
Yeah, excellent.
We did that sort of on purpose. Yeah, we were sort of.
Sounds great.
It's a little bit of a departure, but it's back to the Linda Keir. Not married, because this book doesn't have any sort of marital dynamics in terms of what's happening in the action, but it's our first real thriller.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Maybe it's just an ever-evolving brand, which is fine too, right? Yeah.
Well, there's a through line on everything we write, and it is about relationships. And so relationships happen in a crime fiction way. They happen in a relationship way. They happen in a domestic way. They happen in a romantic way. So,
right. Great.
It's all one thing, sort of.
Great. And Keir, can we get a little update on just give us a flavor for the other projects you've got rolling?
So gosh, I don't
it's a trick question.
Yeah, my head's kind of spinning because I've been actually, as I mentioned before we started the podcast, that I was like turning to some new productivity software to track projects. So I'm doing a little bit of ghosting and like some of that, the kind of stuff that a lot of us do as part of our hustle on the side from fiction. And I actually have let's see, the public things are the collaboration I'm doing with James Patterson, Minerva Keen's Detective Club, is coming out in paperback. They're doing a slight rebrand. So now book one is called MK's Detective Club, The Poison Puzzle. And that paperback's coming out soon. And I'm waiting to hear any day now on the pub date for book two, which is in the can. And we don't have, I think the reason they're delaying that is we don't have a final title on that yet, but that should be, I would imagine, later spring to coincide with the paperback release. And I've gotten I've got a spec novel out on submission, another middle grade novel because I'm continuing to write that. And I recently received a very clandestine gig to write a screenplay. So I'm very excited about that.
Wow. Linda, anything else you need to fill us in on?
at ghosting myself,
Yeah.
and working on a Linda Joffe Hall, the very, very beginnings of a Linda Joffe Hall book, uh,
Wow.
which is still pretty new. So nothing to discuss about it yet, but yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, this has been great, you guys. What a rundown and what a world you guys live in. It's fantastic. Just final question. We like to, pass along a name of a book or a writer you think folks should be reading, somebody that might be under the radar, but it could be some big name as well. Just trying to pay it forward a little bit. So maybe start with Linda.
Well, I've stopped watching TV constantly and started reading, and I'm trying to read a book a week this year. So, which I know there's nothing for you, Mark Stevens, but for me, I've and I'm a really good reader, but I just was on to all kinds of other things. So my most recent book that I've really, really enjoyed is called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Kind of a really lovely book about life and friendship and creating, and it's set in um, the gaming, not in the gaming world, but about gamers, people who develop uh, games in the 90s and into the 2000s, and really just a great book.
And she's quite a story because she has had some ups and downs in her career where she just basically sold nothing and she's had some good successes in the past, but this book has just gone into the stratosphere. You
It's
can't go to TikTok without running into it.
Have you read it?
Well, thanks for asking. I made it about a third of the way through and I just didn't care for it. I thought the characters, I just didn't like the way they were treating each other. I just didn't feel invested in the characters. So, and
Interesting. Interesting. I
yeah,
could see why you'd feel that way. I just thought it was just beautifully done, in terms of characters that aren't necessarily they felt very real.
yeah, I could see that. It just didn't, the world and the stakes just didn't matter to me. Just didn't
Yeah, I could
connect.
totally see that. I think it's in a way a younger book for all of us. That's why people were so into it. But
Yeah.
once again, one of the reasons I got really going on watching tons of TV and TikTok, which my whole family is horrified by, is that it connects you with how people are thinking and how in and the brain waves of people, different ages and different time periods, when
Yep.
you're born.
Yep. Here, what about a
Uh,
book?
I just finished Percival Everett's Erasure, which I was crashing through before going to see American Fiction. Everett is a writer I've been getting more and more interested in. I've read some books by him over the past year. I started with The Trees, which was recommended to me by my friend Javier Ramirez at Chicago's Exile and Bookville bookstore. And I just thought The Trees was just, it knocked my socks off. It was something else. And then more recently, I've read Dr. No, which is interesting. It really divided people. Um, Javier loved it. I liked it quite a bit. Um, I mentioned it in my newsletter, Graff paper, and a few people wrote in to say, I just hated that. I couldn't finish it. It's rotten. It's terrible. Um, but American Fiction, I think, will probably have a pretty broad appeal. Everett can be, he's a prickly guy, I believe, in real life, and he's a writer full of big ideas, and he doesn't hold the reader's hand much. His books don't like hold you in a warm embrace. They kind of sometimes hold you at arm's length and challenge you to wriggle your way in. But man, I think he's fascinating. And so, as probably a lot of people know, because American Fiction is getting a lot of attention right now, but
Yeah.
Erasure is about an African American writer whose books deal with the classics, and he just finds himself, he's kind of an experimental writer. He's very highly literary. He can't make any traction in the market. Sometimes he finds his books shelved under African American fiction or something, and he finds that very frustrating because he's the only African American thing about the books. And so, kind of one night in a bit of rage, he starts writing a novel that is, let's say, written in Black vernacular, and he's kind of doing it as a parody. Turns out his agent sells it for a ton of money, and then he's kind of at this crossroads. Do I accept the money? Do I sell the book? Do I promote the book? Um, the book is just great, and the movie is also excellent. Although the movie makes some very different choices and plays things a little more broadly, a little more crowd pleasing. They're both terrific.
Great. Wow, that's great. Sounds like an interesting companion book to Yellowface, which I
Yeah.
thought was a really interesting book. I had some problems with it, but I did finish it. So there you go.
Did you, the one book I'm halfway through that everybody's talking about in that same way, is Nathan Hill's new book. Have you read that, Mark?
My wife is reading it right now, and she says she made it through the beginning, which she wasn't so sure, but now she's into it.
That's kind of
Wellness.
yeah.
Wellness.
Yeah, wellness.
Yeah. But I didn't like Nick's, so
Yeah,
I guess
different
I'm
kind
being
of books and
being a sourpuss here.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love hearing that you're a tough critic, Mark, because it just makes all your praise the more valuable and
Well,
more precious.
you know, I only review things that I like, and there's so many books I just can't get into. But yeah, no. Royal Game, everybody. If you want here's my book recommendation. Royal Game. You're just gonna your head's just gonna be dancing. Your mind is gonna be dancing and
Oh.
having fun. And the whole time you're gonna be so entertained and teased, and your mystery side of your brain is gonna go, what the heck is going on? And you're gonna be looking all around the room, pointing fingers at various people from time to time. And the ending is, as Publishers Weekly said, just really well landed. And it's just a really dynamite read. I think it's going to do really well.
Oh,
So,
you've just
yeah.
made my day.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. I love that. Your mind will be dancing.
My mind is
Yeah.
dancing now from having you said that. Say that.
Yeah. Well, you guys, good luck with your launch events in Denver and Chicago and elsewhere. And we will see you in Tucson, actually. And good luck.
Thank you
Can't
so much,
wait. We'll
Mark.
see you there.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.